we could talk comics all night, but
yeah, I know.
we're
We're not here for that.
Cool. Well, we are here to talk about the Slowdown. This is episode 7 of season 2. I think I've got that right. Yeah, we're starting. We're going for it.
Awesome.
We're rolling. Was there any pre-show business we should have taken care of? Because I can start
over.
I
don't think so. I don't think so. I think we're all good.
All right. Well, Sujewa, welcome back. I'm excited to talk about the slow cinema film that we're going to be discussing tonight. But we're actually talking about 2 movies, because we also have as a guest professor at Baylor University, Chris Hansen is in the house to talk about a film he made in 2013 called Where We Started. Now, Sujewa turned me on to this movie, recommended that we see if we could get you on, and you're gracious enough to come hang out with us for a while. So we will be starting off talking about that film first, and then we will transition to 2001's Waking Life, which unbelievably turns 20 this year.
Wow.
Where does the time go? But Chris, let's just start off. Well, first, sorry, because this is the Slowdown, and one of the things we started this show for many different reasons: my education in slow cinema, but also to talk about Sujewa, who's actually making slow cinema. He's the craftsman here, or sorry, one of the craftsmen here in this particular call. So tell me about the Secret Society for Slow Romance. What's going on with the movie?
Still editing. Did you guys see the new teaser trailer? The latest teaser trailer?
I think I did, yeah.
When did you wait? There's the one that came out a couple weeks ago, right?
Yeah.
Yes. Okay. One. I thought you meant I thought you meant you cut a new one like yesterday, which would not have surprised me.
No, me neither.
What did you think, Ian? How'd you like the latest teaser trailer?
I thought it was really cool.
Awesome.
It again made me really hungry to see the movie. Actually getting to get a real feel for the characters. Now, I just want to see it, and I'm digging the music. I'm digging the scenery. I still don't know how you got half of those big New York shots.
Did the same thing, yeah.
Right. Are you using drones now? Is that it, or
no? Just walking around the city for months on end.
Awesome. Yeah. Well, can't wait to see it. In fact, I feel like I'm keeping you by having me talk about where we started.
It's all good.
And yeah. Okay.
Editing takes forever when you don't shoot everything in one wide shot and with 2 options like in Werewolf. Real editing takes a long time.
Yeah.
Regardless of what Hong Sang-soo said. He said real editing takes 1 day. Like, all right, dude.
I was gonna say, yeah, you could edit something in a day, but is it gonna be any good? I mean,
yeah.
You got to plan things out in a certain way. He does it. I mean, he does it.
But we're not going to talk about Justice League until later.
That's right. Slow cinema. But before we begin, so
I think Justice League counts as slow cinema now. The 4-hour version. So.
It is the Snyder cut. But later this week I should be able to send you a link, and we're gonna do Werewolf 2 later this year, and I have another movie that I have in mind. So Art will be back for Werewolf 2, and Aaliyah will be back also. Sky is coming back. And but before we talk about the new movie, Chris's movie that we're talking about today, it's like 2 years old. No, not 2 years. It's like two films ago, right? You made 2 features after that? Yeah,
I've made 2 since then, yeah.
So you want to talk about those a little bit? What
and in that time, you've made like 10, right? I mean, I just think it's funny that we're talking about slow cinema and you've got like 4 more projects planned after the one that you're editing right now.
Movies take too long to make, man.
I know. I totally. Yeah, I wish I could do it as fast as you.
My brain is like 10 years ahead.
So after Where We Started, I made a film called Blur Circle, which is about a woman dealing with the loss of her son, disappeared 2 years prior, young toddler.
Same lead actress, right?
Yeah, same lead actress.
Oh, wow.
She's just a brilliant actress, Cora. And, I wrote, I didn't write Blur Circle. I conceived of the character with her in mind. And then one of my colleagues here, who's also been the producer on all my films, Brian Elliott, wrote the script.
Brian, woo!
Yeah, Brian's great. And he wrote Blur Circle. It's a beautiful script. We just took a very different approach. Where We Started is low, it's slow, it's low key, it's long talking scenes, and Blur Circle is a much more traditional film that in terms of its style and scope, it's got a traditional amount of scenes and much shorter scenes and builds its emotions and its climaxes in more traditional ways. And it received a lot of awards, but a lot of really great festival screenings and several awards. And so we were really proud of that. And then the one I finished, and it just finished its festival run, is called 7 Short Films About Our Marriage,
which played in CineQuest 2020 in the start of the pandemic.
Right. Yeah, that was a lot of fun. So I was at CineQuest when it was halfway through. In fact, we had our premiere screening, but we had 2 more screenings to come, and they shut down. And we went home. So that was the very start of the pandemic. And
insanity.
Yeah, and then every festival went virtual after that. So, you want to talk about virtual festivals, I can talk about that experience too from a filmmaker's perspective. But so yeah, 7 Short Films About Our Marriage is the story of one marriage told over 7 segments where we kind of jump in and out of time. Where we visit them 2 years after they get married and 5 years after they get married and at their 10-year college reunion, and kind of look at the problems that they're facing. It's really structured around the little things that marriages deal with, and not huge, big issues like infidelity, but more like the everyday kind of stuff.
Ian might like it. Send him a copy.
I will send you a link to see it, Ian. Yeah, and we have a distribution deal for that, and we're in the process of giving the company the deliverables, and they'll start the process of scheduling release. So
wow, I mean, so that's yeah, I definitely want to check it out. I'm embarrassed to say, because of my schedule, I watched Where We Started yesterday morning in 2 parts because my days are crazy.
I do that all the time these days.
Right. So, but then I was kind of looking you up afterwards, and then I saw that, yeah, you'd done 2 films after this. And your latest film seemed really intriguing to me. And I'm just like, I would like to see this. And I noticed that it came out last year, and I noticed the release date. I'm like, oh, that's probably a story. But now that you're actually getting a distro deal, yeah, I think when you figure out, when it's coming out, what, media and all that stuff, yeah, we should definitely, have you on to talk about that in depth. Because if it's anything like Where We Started, there's a lot to chew on, I imagine.
Yeah, I would love to talk with you about it. I'm really proud of it. It's, I every time I make something, I always say, I think this is my best film. And then my wife always says, well, I should hope so, because you should be getting better every time. But I'm really proud of what we did with it, because, we had to take this couple from I kind of have tried to describe it as Richard Linklater's Boyhood, but with a marriage. And we also didn't take 12 years to film it, or 14 years in our case, because the story takes place over 14 years. And we had to age up our characters convincingly, but not with prosthetics and things like that. And so it's a combination of, great makeup and hair and really great performances, and, body language and attitude and things like that. And I was blessed to work with some really great actors in this who were, I've worked with Cora from Where We Started, and Matt, who from Where We Started, is actually somebody I went to college with. Matt, that's how I know him. And then he married Cora, and I cast both of them. So I had made a film without the 2 of them in a while as leads. So making 7 short films with actors I'd never worked with was an adventure for me, but it was such a great experience. So yeah, I don't want to, obviously that's for a later discussion, but
next show,
I'll share it with you.
Well,
yeah, send me a link also. Maybe you already did, but
I don't know if I did, but I'll send it to both of you after this.
Awesome. Yeah, so let's talk about Where We Started. You mentioned Linklater. Sujewa and I, we had a bit of a gap, but we spent 3 months going through the Before trilogy. And Where We Started struck me as it's almost like the Before trilogy wrapped up into One Night in Miami.
Yeah,
mostly,
yeah.
mostly, not any of the racial or political issues of the time, but just focused on this motel room and very
Yes.
significant things happening over the course of one night, and the truths of these complicated relationships really coming out. So you mentioned that you are married. Were you married when you wrote Where We Started?
Yeah, I've been married for what year is it? For about 28 years.
Okay.
Good job.
So
Yeah.
so where I'm not going to exactly ask you the annoying question of where do your ideas come from, but
No.
as a married guy, like, what was the seed of writing a film about
Infidelity.
two married people who come together? We don't, it is essentially a two-person drama, so we don't
Yeah.
like flash to what the other families are doing. We all see that in dialogue and like snippets
Yeah.
of one-sided phone calls. But where did the genesis of this spring out? Was it stuff that you were working on in your own personal life, or was it just something you were kind of theorizing, like, this is wedded bliss, I wonder what it'd be like to be an unhappy person?
Well, no, it definitely wasn't. That we had dealt with the issues that they are facing, or I should say, and this is kind of what Seven Short Films explores too. No marriage is like this perfect idyllic thing that you think it's going to be when you get married. And so, my wife and I are going strong. We're close to 30 years now, but that doesn't mean we've never had problems. And so I think that what the characters are dealing with in their marriages, in Where We Started, is really more where my personal experience can kind of come into play. The Will, played by Matt, he's an artist, and he's going to auditions and driving back, and trying to save money, and I can see myself in him, as a filmmaker who wanted to not make my family sacrifice for what I was passionate about. And so I took kind of day jobs and worked on it on the side. And for her, she describes a very controlling husband who everything has to be perfect. And I unfortunately can be that guy sometimes. Now, not to the degree that her husband is in the story.
I think that's the film director thing. I have the same thing.
Yeah,
I have the same problem sometimes.
Right. Yeah, I'm a control freak. I really am, and I'm a clean freak, and I want things a certain way. And so I think that, and also my wife and I were married long enough that we saw people who got married, right out of college. That I got married 2 weeks after I graduated from college. My wife had been out for a year, and we couldn't wait to get married. And we knew many other people who got married as soon as they got out of college, or some who got married in college. And there's a lot of those people who aren't together anymore. Not a ton, but a fair number. And some of it was infidelity, some of it was other reasons. But I think just a combination of all those things, years down the road into my marriage, got me thinking about, what would that look like, and what would these people, if they met and were instantly attracted to each other and they had all these other issues, how would it play out? How would it make them want to do things that they shouldn't do? So
also, the setup you have for making movies is suited for a 2-character movie with the crew that you have, and the set and the settings and the resources you have, right? Was that one of the reasons?
I always write with I always write with trying to keep in mind what I can do on a low budget with a small crew, inexperienced crew, because we use our students from the Baylor film program as part of our crew. We always hire professionals as key, department heads, and as the actors and everything. But our students are learning on the job as well. And so what can we do with students that that's still challenging, but we make films on a micro budget. Now might be more than maybe Sujewa what you are spending, because we have access to a bit of a budget through the department, but we're not making what Linklater's spending, for example. So everything we do has to keep in mind what can we accomplish, and we have to, because of the student involvement and the cost, we're staying in this local area in Waco, Texas. So we have to shoot, maybe we could drive a half hour away. And in fact, we drove to a little town a half hour away for that motel. Because
I thought the motel room was a set. Didn't you say
the
room
interior
was
was a set? Yeah,
Right.
of course the exterior was not. So, and I do have a great story to tell you about our exterior. So I'll tell you that when we get to it. But yeah, well, we had found that exterior, and the interior looked just fantastic. It looked a lot like what our set was. Our set was inspired by the interior of the hotel. So, but that town was about a half hour away, and that's about the furthest we tend to go. So,
So tell me about you built a set. Is
Mhm.
this also part of the sort of the film program of helping to get students into, film students, they want to make movies ultimately. So it's like, well, you're helping out on this short film. Let's build a set. Maybe we don't need to because we've got a motel room, or maybe you do need to because the motel room is so small you have to be able to blow it out and move around. Is that kind of what you're dealing with?
well, when we did this one, we didn't do set building as a regular thing for these films. And this is the first one where we had actually built a set. We have a small studio space in our department where we could build like pieces of sets. We have like the resources to put up like a false wall or two false walls connected, and so you can create like a corner of a room and those kinds of things. So the students can learn how to do that. And when we needed to do this, we needed way more space, and we needed a controlled. We decided we wanted this because they spend so much time in these motel rooms that we needed to have it controlled. And from a weather standpoint, it could be a base of operations for us. When there was bad weather, we could say, okay, well, we're going to go shoot the scenes that are set in the motel room because we can't shoot those exterior scenes that we were planning to shoot. So it became a great setup for us. But I didn't know how to build a set. The guy who ended up being our sound engineer, who was a colleague in the department at the time, knew enough about construction. He's basically builds stuff for himself. So he said, I'll build the set. So he basically built the whole darn thing pretty much on his own. And so we built it with a false ceiling, so you could see the ceiling, but we could remove the ceiling when we needed to for lighting or whatever. And the wall between the two apartments where the adjoining door was movable, so it could move in and out to give us more space in whichever room we were shooting in at the time. So yeah, it was a great setup.
The set looked real. Yeah, if you didn't tell me it was a set, I would be like, yeah.
Now the only thing that we shot inside the actual motel was the bathroom, the scene where she's in the bathtub. Or is that scene even make the final film? I can't remember. We shot a scene with her laying in the bathtub where she gets a phone call from her husband and doesn't answer it or something. And that may have not made the final version, but
I don't remember it.
Yeah, okay. So I think it got cut for time because it wasn't necessary. There's a lot of stuff, not a lot, but there was a fair amount of material before they meet where we were like, let's trim it.
The dragon scene, the dragon attacking.
Yeah, right. Well, yeah, we had some CGI problems. So we had shot one scene in the bathroom in the motel, and obviously we didn't have running water on our set, so we had to use their bathroom. But that was it.
I'm curious, as far as you've got people in the department at Baylor helping you to make this movie. Is this a common thing where they're just like movies being made, or do you have to petition or submit a brief or something to get the funds so that this year the project goes to Chris and his movie, and next year it goes to Harriet or someone?
That's a good question. So at the time I was hired, nobody else was really doing it. I don't know how much you know about the academic system, but if you're hired,
not much.
Yep.
That's fine. Yeah. I prefaced it because I'm about to explain something and I don't want to sound like I'm explaining something if you already know it. But
don't prof-splain us, sir.
No, go for it. Explain away.
So if you get hired at an institution, and there's a thing called tenure, you may have heard of that.
Yeah.
And tenure is a thing that you have to earn. So after a probationary period, usually 5 to 6 years, you go up for tenure, which means you apply for tenure and promotion. And at most universities, if you don't get tenure, that's it. You get let go. So it's not, so it's not like, it's up or out is the way they refer to it. And so to get tenure at different institutions requires different things. At an institution like Baylor, it's considered a research institution. So professors have to do research and they have to publish that research. Now, in my shoes, in a creative role, I had to make films. And so my department said, yes, you need to make films, so we're going to support that with budget where we can, not a lot. And then, the opportunity to do it, we made it a class, so the students would get course credit and have an opportunity to learn on the set. Like we decided to do all those things. So
it's a great setup for an indie filmmaker.
Yeah. So I was the only one doing it. So it really wasn't a situation where anybody was like, well, it's my turn now. And if somebody ever said that, then I would of course been like, yeah, okay, it's your turn. Now we're at a point where we have a lot more, we've hired other people and we've really kind of brought on people who are more interested in filmmaking, because we had we were in the communication department. We had some people focused on film and filmmaking, but we also have had a lot of people focused on the more broadcast side and also like the technologies of the industry. And so they weren't making things. Now we have several filmmakers who are making things, and also some, I'm pretty much the only one who's focusing on features, or not the only one, but the only one who has been. We've had people do shorts. And so sometimes the summer projects will consist of 2 short films instead of a feature. I often say to people, if anybody, I was just the only one who kind of pulled my crap together and was ready to go, so nobody else was really doing that. And so I was the one with the initiative, but I had a lot of reason to have initiative because I had to get tenure. So I had to have something to show for my work, my years here in order to get tenure. And that was really why they prioritized my work at that point. Now I'm the chair of the department, so I get to make the decision about who goes next. But I'm, of course, if nobody else has a project, then I'll do a project my own. But like I already have some, we had a project that was supposed to go this coming summer, which of course, because of the pandemic, we've delayed, but that person is already kind of reserved next summer. So that's kind of how we do it.
Awesome. Do you plan on making, oh, sorry, go ahead, Dean.
Oh, I was just going to ask, you said that you're the one who had kind of your act together and you're ready to go. You are an older gentleman. Are the people that are sort of coming new into the program, are you finding they're younger, I guess? Is it, do you think it's a maturity thing? Do you think it's I want to make movies without the kind of recognition of everything it takes to pull them together?
No, actually, everybody who's here and making movies is like, they know their stuff. I think some of them know it better than I do. No, it was really more like, I was kind of joking about that to a degree, because somebody said at one point, like, at some point somebody else is going to want to, and it won't be your turn. And they weren't saying it like angrily, but they were I think they were kind of like trying to make sure, give me notice, and I was like, yeah, no, I totally get that. I'm just, nobody else is stepping up, and so I'm going to keep stepping up. It was more at the time what I said earlier, that there was just nobody for whom that was a priority in the work that they do. And we've brought on some people who that definitely is a priority now, and other people who had been here a long time, and like Brian Elliott, who's been producer on my films and is a writer himself. He just hasn't directed a ton, but he can direct. And he just, I said, look, start, like, you should do this. You should be directing the next project if you want. So I just encouraged him to do it when he was ready. So
2 questions.
Yeah,
go ahead, Dean. Okay. 2 questions. One, do you plan on making movies outside of the Baylor system? And were they happy where we started, played in New York and LA and got good reviews? I had a little bit to do with the New York part.
Yes, very much. Yeah. Yeah, I would love to direct movies outside the Baylor system. I'm looking for opportunities to do that, just because I'd like to have like an infrastructure that is outside of what we can do here. Like, what we can do here is completely dependent on us. And I feel like what we could potentially do with, a producer who is not us, it could potentially be larger in scope, maybe, pre-sell a film, things that we haven't tried to do because we don't have the experience doing it. It's not that we couldn't learn, but it's a lot to learn when you also have a full-time day job and you don't run in those circles, So we'll talk to our distributor. They said when we signed on with them that they really like to have a long-term relationship with the filmmakers, and so I'm hoping that maybe because they're a producer of some material as well.
This is indie rights?
Actually, this one we're doing with a different company.
Okay, cool.
So I'm not going to reveal that yet, just because
we'll find out.
They'll announce. They want to announce, when they're ready. And then what was the second question?
How did Baylor like where we started playing in New York, LA, getting good reviews?
Well, I'll say it's hard to say how Baylor likes anything because, it's such a big institution that, we just kind of think about our small corner of it. But the people that I answer to, we're in the College of Arts and Sciences. So my boss is like the dean of the College of Arts and Sciences. And then the boss of everybody is the provost of the whole university, the academic officer of the university. But yeah, my dean he's a scientist, he's a geologist. And so film is not really his thing, but I think he understands enough to know that, that we've done some pretty successful things over here with the films. And so, I think people are proud of those accomplishments. I know our department is very proud of those accomplishments that we've had with the films. So, where we started being able to go to LA and we had a great event out in LA because we have a lot of alums out there too. And, in fact, I remember one of our alums who I hadn't met yet, but Brian has been around a lot longer at Baylor. He knows everybody. And he keeps in touch with our alums out in LA especially. But, one of these alums came to the screening and obviously enjoyed the film and said, I'd love to work with you guys. And he's an editor. He ended up editing Blur Circle.
Awesome.
And so, that's how those relationships get built. So.
Yeah, kind of picking up on that question, I was wondering the success of the movies that you're doing. Do you find and I'm wondering because when you started, you were sort of the ground zero for this effort for this program. So are you finding that with the success of the movies that you're making with this program, is that attracting some of the talent that you're now seeing and incorporating into what the program is going to be? Is it a good recruitment tool in short?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I think because we can say, look, we've made, I've made 5 of these films, but we've made 6 feature films as a department, and they've played in some, significant, I would say a growing list of more significant festivals with each film. And one of my colleagues who's a younger, is a short filmmaker, and he made one short as a graduate student here in our program that then played in festivals for like 2-3 years and was very successful. And then the first film he made as a faculty member here, now he teaches here, has been incredibly successful as well. And so, I often, I was the guy who was like, talking to students about festivals, and now I feel like he's the expert because he has been, and also he's a young married guy with no children. And so he goes to like every festival he can go to. I just can't do that. So he's been to a ton more festivals than I have. And he has just great experience. Now we have a festival in our city that he is like their head programmer. And so he has this great experience. He's like a screener for the Austin Film Festival, which is actually pretty selective in terms of how you get to be a screener. So he has tons of experience. And so like, I think that, us having made these films, having people like that, we speak as filmmakers to potential students. And I think that's very attractive. Yeah.
I didn't even know about Baylor until I heard about your movies.
Yeah. Well, there hadn't been a person tenured for what I do for making films in Baylor for quite a while. I don't know if there had been one in our program ever before I started doing it, because we were not just a film program. We were kind of more of a media program. Now we're both. So
awesome.
Wow. So getting back to making this movie, I mean, can you kind of walk us through, you conceived of it, you wrote it, like tell me
Mhm.
what it was like casting. Now, did you say that you had worked with the actors before this, or was this your first time working with them?
I had worked with Matt. He had been in my previous film Endings. So I had written Endings and I'd showed it to a friend of mine from college who was teaching at the university we went to. And he read it and he loved it. He said, "You should get in touch with Matt Brumlow about." And I had lost touch with Matt over the years because when I graduated from college, we didn't have email, so we didn't have a good way to stay in touch with people. And I just lost touch with Matt. He had been a freshman when I was a senior, so he still had a lot of college to go. And he was pursuing acting, and he was good even in college. And he went to Chicago after college, and I think he went to get his master's at, I can't remember if he went to Northwestern or not, but I think he went and got a master's degree, but he went and acted in Chicago, really the point, and became quite a well-regarded Chicago stage actor. Won a number of awards. The Jeff Award in Chicago was a big
Oh yeah.
Chicago Theater Award that he had won. He was named one of like Chicago's 50 most attractive people.
Well, Ian is in Chicago, right?
Oh no, I didn't realize that. I'm sorry.
No, it's cool. I'm actually I'm in Skokie, right outside the Windy City. So yeah,
Okay.
I know what I have a bunch of friends who are into like community theater and stuff out here, so I know all about the Jeffs and
Yeah.
yeah, that's
Yeah.
cool.
So yeah, he became pretty well regarded out there. And so I had connected with him, and he wanted to do Endings, and he played. So there were kind of three leads in Endings, and he played one of the leads in that. And we just great experience reconnecting with him. I remember what great friendship we had, and that now we were connecting really as artists who wanted to share our work together, which was incredible. He always, whenever I'm feeling down about working and getting to do art, and we get on FaceTime or on Zoom or whatever with him, and sometimes him and his wife, and we just talk about all the stuff that we want to do or are doing or have done, and they're fantastic. So I'd worked with him on Endings, and so when I wrote Where We Started, I don't think I don't know if I wrote it with him in mind, but he was always in the back of my mind. But I hadn't met his wife. They had gotten married after Endings, and she had acted in Chicago theater as well, but I hadn't seen her in anything. I mean, I don't live in Chicago, so I didn't, and it's not like you can see theater performances like you can films. So
Right.
so I didn't have a way to see her. She had great reviews, and I think I did like a video interview with her or something, and I decided to cast her. And then they made some like I was trying to raise funds using like Kickstarter, and they made like little promotional videos in character that they shot themselves, thinking about having an affair. And so she was just great right from the beginning. And so I had written the script, and then I went out to Indianapolis, where they were both working in a show of Christmas Carol at the Indiana Rep, and or were they? One of them was working in it. I can't remember if they were both in it or not. She was in it, and I stayed with them, and they were in a long-term apartment, housing that they were in for like a month or 6 weeks or however long they were there, and we workshopped the script over a long weekend whenever they were not working, and essentially rewrote parts of it. It's funny, the original version was very abstract in places, talking about actors and what they do, and like the stuff where they're laying in bed together, they spoke very abstractly, and we read it together and it just didn't work. It was just like it was boring, and it felt like philosophizing and not in place with where they were in the story. So we ended up rewriting a lot. And
they
so
were like, you haven't cheated in a while, have you?
So I gave them credit in the credits for additional dialogue, because they helped me come up with a lot of stuff. But there's also some funny stuff that came about from acting things out, like getting it up on his feet and acting it out. Because the part where he is flirting with her by showing her how he mixes drinks, which is obviously his signature move, So in the film, he's showing her how to dip the glass or salt the glasses, or sugar is what he's using, right? And so, that's when he puts his arm around her and guides her hand and does the whole thing. So we wanted to make this whole physical contact thing. Originally, it was when he was mixing the drink, like in the mixer, which I'd written without really thinking about how it looked, with the two of them with their hands around the mixer and going like this.
Well, here's a related question.
Then when they did, I was just gonna say, when they did that, it looked so ridiculous. We all were like, okay, this is not gonna work. And Matt actually came up with the whole business about the glasses, because he knows how to do that stuff, and I don't. My brother likes to say, you have no idea how to drink, and I'm like, no, I don't know how this stuff works. So I'll drink a nice mixed drink, but I don't know how to make them. So sorry, go ahead.
One problem with a married couple is, did you have to work to make them seem like strangers to get the familiarity out of the way?
One good thing is, when you have two really talented actors, they know how to do that on their own.
Awesome.
The other good thing is that, strangely enough, they have completely different styles and approaches to acting. Matt is what you would call an outside-in actor, meaning he really wants to work on the look of the character, and that helps him understand who the character is. So unlike Blur Circle, he was talking to me about, I want to grow a mustache and I want to wear glasses. And I think it's like all this stuff that was really peripheral to what was important about the character, but that was helping him get at understanding the character. And Cora is an inside-out actor who, really is focused completely on, like, what is driving this character, where is she coming from, and that's going to determine all the choices, whether it be behavior or looks or whatever. So so because of that, when they're on the set, they don't always mesh. Like they mesh in terms of the scenes, but in terms of, like, they're not acting like a married couple, because they want to do their own thing, And in fact, sometimes when Cora was like struggling to do something or trying to focus, Matt would come up behind her and say, why don't you try? And she's like, stop, don't
back up,
let me do it. Because that's his nature. Maybe that's a guy thing, but I know I'm like that too. It's his nature to be, I want to help you, and her nature is, no, let me, because this is my process, I need to do it. So
now I wonder, because the way you're describing your two actors and their methods for getting into character reminds me of a very powerful. It's meant to be a light scene, but it reveals some darker, truths about these characters. There's that door between the rooms, and they're peeking into each other's rooms, looking at the suitcases, and kind of is saying, "Okay, what can you tell about me from just looking around my room?" And that really speaks to the Will character. He's has a lot of kind of nice suits, nice ties. He's living beyond his means. He's trying to, like, really sell himself aesthetically.
Right.
Whereas with Nora, she's like, all of that, the flashiness is sort of underneath in the choice of her underwear, and she's not very forthcoming with what's going on inside. She's very guarded. Now, did any of that was that in your script? Did that come out from being around your actors while you were kind of workshopping things? Was that their input? Where did that come from? Because it seems almost perfect to the situation you're describing.
Yeah, I think, okay, since we're going back a few years, I'm going to remember some things incorrectly, but here's what I remember, what I think I remember. The scene was definitely in the script, but I think that both actors contributed, helped to change the content to make it more relatable to their particular situation. Because I do think that one of the benefits of working with them from early on in the script process was they had a real sense of who these characters were supposed to be, and they were contributing to it. So what I think happened was, I wrote the scene with some stuff in there that probably is in an old draft, but that they helped me really refine it. So I'm guessing that's partially why it resonates that way, because I think that they really brought something to that scene, and that's what they did kind of all throughout. I love actors who are willing to kind of say, I really don't think she would say this, and because that means that they feel who the character is. Now, I also appreciate it when I say, no, she's going to say it. but I like to be able to, if I hear that, I want to listen and I want to know, why they feel that way. So, and so collaborating with actors was something that on this particular film that I really embraced and enjoyed because they brought so much to it.
Those two actors had a lot of success since then, right? I've seen Facebook posts on Cora stuff, and what are they up to now?
So Cora is, she has had a regular spot on a Netflix show that, sorry, I always forget the name of it, but it's the one with Lily Tomlin and Jane Fonda.
It's two ladies.
Yeah,
names.
like Frankie and something. Or
Okay,
Yes.
yeah, I haven't seen it, but I know
cannot
which show.
Sorry, I don't know why, because only thing I can think of is that old play and movie Frankie and Johnny, which it's not that, but that's what always pops into my head. So I apologize, I'm just old. But she had a couple of episodes that she was on of that, and then she's gonna, I believe, when they get to making the next season post pandemic, she's supposed to be a recurring, not like a regular character, but recurring. So she's shooting
Awesome.
several episodes. So yeah, she's starting to have some good, opportunities. And Matt had taken a little bit of a break from acting and went and got his MFA in directing because he wanted to also eventually be able to pursue academics. But then they decided to make a move to LA because of those opportunities she was having. And so I think he's now got the itch back to get back on stage and pursue some opportunities. So he's doing that at the moment.
Those two are going places.
Absolutely, they're both fantastic.
So is it time for Awaken Life?
I think so. I mean, I feel like we could talk about where we
could,
started
yeah.
for like another 3
Well, let me tell
hours,
you
but-
one more story. Let me just tell you one more story because I alluded to it earlier, and if anybody was paying attention. So, we had planned about 5 or 6 different shooting nights at the motel. They were kind of spread out over the shoot because it was an established location. We could just come back, and on our, I don't know if it was our first night there or our second night, but partway through, so we had like 5 or 6 significant scenes to shoot, and some of them were complicated. Like we were doing Steadicam. We had never done Steadicam before. Now we're doing Steadicam scenes, walk and talk kind of scenes with Steadicam, which was, it was a lot. So we're shooting. We at some point, a guy comes out from one of the rooms, I think room 7, and he wants to know who's in charge, and we all point him to Brian because Brian was the producer. So, and he hands his phone, his flip phone, to Brian, and Brian ends up talking to the hotel owner who doesn't live in that city, apparently lived in another city, but and he explained that we would have to leave. And no, we had signed a location agreement with this guy, and we had already shot half the night. And but apparently the guy in room 7 was running several, let's just say, not really legal businesses out of his room that we were affecting his work. And
why does that trump your written agreement? Can't you just call the cops?
So so I actually wrote this situation into 7 short films about our marriage, since the guy is a filmmaker, by the way.
Nice.
But the not the illegal part, but just getting the kicked out of a location part. It's so basically Brian negotiated to let us finish the night because we still had a lot to film. But he said, look, we've established a location. Can you finish? Can you get the scenes you need to get? And I know it's a lot, and it's a lot for the actors. So we went into scramble mode, and all these things that we were going to do in complicated setups. And, we turned one long walk and talk with, there was going to be a walk and talk with singles, Steadicam, 2-shot, Steadicam her, Steadicam him, cut it all together. That turned into a cameras locked down by the door. They walk onto the alley, the walkway where the room is, and then they stop halfway and talk, and then they walk closer to the door. Like we just turned it into a kind of a more still mise-en-scène that ended up really working much better than what I had been planning. because it just excuse me, just let the actors act, you know. And so we got out of there with all but one scene shot by the time the sun rose, and later Brian negotiated to get us permission to come back and shoot that one scene because it was fairly short and we could get it done in the early evening. But
before
yeah,
the guy in room 7's business really got going.
really kicks off. Yeah. So,
Filmmaking trouble.
yeah. So
Good job.
it was quite an evening.
One last question. It's kind of a logistical question. There is a really lovely motorcycle riding montage in the middle of the night. It looks like you guys were in traffic. Like, was someone just like hang out of a car following that motorcycle? Did you have to clear anything? Like, how did that work?
We should have cleared that. and I tell you definitively, we would do that now for safety and legal reasons. We definitely would do it. We've learned a lot of lessons over the years, but I think the way we shot that, if I remember correctly, was our camera guy, who was our DP and camera operator, was sitting. I mean, I shouldn't act like it was. He had a spotter. He had somebody holding him, you know, but they were in the back of a pickup truck, and so. But you know, and it looks a lot faster than they're actually driving, just because the nature of those things when they're on camera. And it was the middle of the night, so traffic was very minimal. There were some cars, and you know, fortunately, because it's a montage, we could drive any which way we wanted, and it didn't have to cut together in a traditional way. So yeah, there's a lot of stopping and starting. You know, we were on this one long road in a certain part of Waco that, you know, you basically just go all the way down it and then turn around and come all the way back and turn into a parking lot. And so we must have done that, you know, several times to get all the shots we wanted. So
nice segment.
That was my one criticism, I think, of Nora's character. When Will convinced her to get on that bike and he didn't have helmets for the both of them, like there's no way a mother of a 4-year-old is going to do that.
That's a very good point. That's a very good point. And all I can say is I'm shocked that I live in a state where helmets aren't required, and I'm just shocked by that. I think it's insane. I wouldn't get on a motorcycle even with a helmet, but because I'm a scaredy cat. But yeah, you're absolutely right. That's a bit of a good point.
Texas is weird.
As we have learned this year, especially.
That's
weird,
right.
So.
But the power going out.
Well, so let's talk about Waking Life. It is not that much of a departure, kind of as we mentioned, because there's a lot of Linklater. We didn't even talk about the whole John Hughes thing, but I was digging the hell out of that.
Yeah, thank you.
Many conversations about John Hughes and getting into the nitty gritty and theorizing. It was a lot of fun.
People of a certain age just can't not talk about stuff like that. So.
I recognize myself in a lot of those conversations.
Yeah, we can bring Chris back for other shows on his movies, especially when the new one comes out.
Oh yeah. So Waking Life, Richard Linklater, 2001. I had not seen this movie in probably more than 10 years, but as my wife reminded me, when this came out, we saw it together multiple times in the theater, and I think we, you know, I have my DVD from 2002, which I broke out to watch this morning, and I watched it a whole bunch of times. So watching it again today, I was just reminded of all of these scenes that I had forgotten about. I feel like I half remembered them from a dream, which is fitting because this is a movie about a kid played by Wiley Wiggins who is going through this endless dream loop. Something happens to put him into this state where he keeps waking up and waking up and waking up. And in the middle, he's doing this kind of like a walk and talk around his town. I'm assuming it's Austin or some place. Meeting people, having these really deep philosophical conversations about existentialism and aging and all this great stuff. But what makes it really unique is that it was all animated in this bizarre pseudo rotoscoped kind of a fashion that was really cutting edge in 2001, and something I didn't pick up on until really this viewing, I think, because I'm older and I'm more keyed into the conversations than I was, is how prescient a lot of these ideas were from 20 years ago in terms of the evolution of man in the face of technology. But yeah, how did you first encounter Waking Life? What do you make of it? Do you even like it?
Go ahead, Chris.
Okay. Yeah, I definitely, I remember seeing the previews for it and just being bowled over by the look. I wanted to see it just for the look, and I don't know if I knew much about who Linklater was then. I certainly love Linklater now, and I mean, you mentioned his influence, and you know, I mentioned his influence on 7 short films, but yeah, I mean, I think Sujewa and I talked about where we started was heavily influenced by the Before trilogy. You mentioned The Connection, but I meant to say, yeah, it was definitely an influence. People have noted it before, so I'm a huge fan of what he does, and I, yeah, I don't, I remember not being that bowled over by the film at the time. And so maybe it's kind of the same thing that you had talked about, of not really being as keyed into the ideas, because the look I remember loving, and watching it again, I remember I was looking at it going, this looks amazing. Even today, you know, 20 years later, it still looks wonderful and inventive. And, you know, I am definitely liked it a ton more now than I did before, and I didn't dislike it. I just didn't, it didn't connect with me on a level where I was like, let me watch this over and over again. But it's kind of in a way like Kurosawa's Dreams. I don't know if you guys are familiar with
Yeah, I
that.
saw it.
I haven't seen it.
So, well, if you like Waking Life, I'd recommend watching Dreams. But Dreams is like based on a number of dreams that Kurosawa had, and they're completely not connected segments that are very dream reality stuff. And there are some of those that I really love, and some that just, you know, are interesting but not great to me. So I kind of feel the same way about this. It's like you can go into and out of these episodes, and there's some where I'm like, okay, I'm ready for this one. I'm ready for Wiley to move on, you know. And then there are others where I'm like, I want to know more about that. What's that guy's deal? I mean, that guy in the, I've forgotten how violent it was in places. You know, how it dwelled in or got into kind of the depravity of people to a degree. Like the really angry guy in the prison, you know,
Who was
go
all
ahead.
red? Yeah.
Yeah. The depiction was very
Demonic
evocative.
Man.
Yeah, right. I'd forgotten about that, and that was one of those where I was like, I don't remember this part. And the one in the bar where the guy's describing, you know, the guy he shot, and then he tries the gun and shoots the bartender, who then gets his gun and shoots him. I was like, wow, okay, I don't remember that at all. So I think I had kind of glossed over some of those elements of it. But yeah, it really resonated a lot more. The ideas especially, but also I think just my tolerance for a film like this that just allows you to kind of go from thing to thing and doesn't have to tie it together. It's kind of like what Kaveh Zahidi is saying in his segment of the film, where he's talking about why do films have to all be narrative? And of course, he's in a film that is not doing that at all. And so it's kind of a meta filmic statement about this film, which really worked for me in that context. So.
Yeah.
I first saw it. No, I was at a movie theater when it first came out. I snuck into it for a little bit, and then I was like, all right, I'll catch up with this one. I'll catch up with this one later. Then I never caught up with it until I saw it for this show. I thought it was like Slacker, except just the different styles of animation kind of makes it disjointed, not kind of together, because Slacker is just the same look all the way through. I thought, you know, I would enjoy it if they just shot it without the animation. I may have enjoyed it a little bit more, but for what it is, it's amazing. I mean, you know, it's an unusual show. No one's done anything like that. I really liked the Kaveh Zahidi segment. That was good. And throughout, there was some interesting ideas.
So you didn't like the animation?
I thought it was okay. I mean, the animation is nice, but overall, as a movie with all the different styles, all the jumping around, it seemed a little disjointed. I think I would have enjoyed it more as a cohesive one piece if it had the same look. Like even if even if it was not animated, if it was just shot normally, just like Slacker 2.
Well, I mean, it's interesting you say that, because there are some sort of fantasy sequences in here that I had forgotten about, because I just remembered it as a rotoscope movie as well, but it's
That I
not. I
remember.
mean, there's the scene where Wiley, we visited a couple of times, where he's walking up to a car and all of a sudden he starts floating and he's sort of his whole body is turned upside down as he's grabbing for the car handle, and then of course he flies up into the air. You couldn't really accomplish that without the use of CGI. I think the I don't, there was some making of stuff on the DVD which for some reason I couldn't access, like the menu was hidden even though it's advertised on the back. I'm like, let me see it. So I don't know if that was an invention of the animators or if they actually filmed Wiley Wiggins on some kind of like a wire harness as he's being hoisted into the air and flipped around, and they animated on top of it. But it certainly looked as realistic as a lot of the other hand movements in the film. So I think the animation added to that, dreamlike surrealistic quality of scenes melding into each other and characters kind of coming and going into different different locations. The scene it was like a giant, almost like a studio. There was the guy with the banjo and the tattoo and the overalls, the dude in the chair, and there was one other person. But yeah, that I don't know, there was something, if that was just filmed regularly, I'd be like, well, why are these three people just sitting here in this random room? There was something about the animation that put up that absurdist wall that I was able to sink into.
Yeah, it had the same effect for me as it did for, I was just gonna, for me it was, I just had that same, like the nature of what they were talking about, the nature of kind of the whole fact that it was a waking dream, or what was it, a waking dream, what was the situation, was all, to me, the animation made that possible, or it was a technique that they chose to do that, to depict that. Without that, I'm not sure you'd have to do something else to make that have that same feel.
Yeah. So yeah, for a movie about dreaming, this is ideal, the technique they used. Yeah. Without all of that, just people walking around talking about the ideas, as in Slacker, I would have enjoyed that also.
Yeah, I enjoy Slacker, so I certainly understand where you're coming from with that. And these actors, I say actors, but some of them are just people playing themselves essentially.
Right.
And
there's a Before Sunrise, that couple is in there.
Yeah, I love that scene.
And I finally, after 20 years, I finally understand that scene. What I thought was interesting is, Before Sunrise came out in 95. Before Sunset was what year was that? That was
2004, maybe.
They're all 9 years apart.
Okay.
So,
yeah.
So what's interesting about this is, as we established in Before Sunset, they never connected with each other. There's 9 years apart in the story and in the film. So this movie came out in 2001. So we're essentially seeing, I guess, an alternate reality where they did go meet each other and they ended up in bed together. Yeah. So watching it now, I'm like, oh, I'm, and they're making reference back to, I assume it would have been Before Sunset, or Sunrise. Sorry.
Before Sunrise. Yeah.
Yeah.
After Before Sunrise, before Sunset.
Right.
They're making a reference to something they did.
Yeah.
I'm pretty sure to something I think
there's
I
a couple
remember
lines
her
of dialogue. Yeah, they're like, yeah, remember when you said this? And she's like, yeah, remember when you said that? And it leads to this whole conversation. Yeah, it's nice because I like the idea of Linklater creating this wider universe. Yeah. And I wonder if that was something he was trying to tie in with Slacker. I've not seen Slacker. That's that I gotta scratch that off my bucket list. Yeah, definitely.
The team, the Before team said, meeting up to shoot that short for the Waking Life movie, that's what convinced them they should try to make a sequel, Before Sunset. So this is important for the continuing Before trilogy.
Well, they've only got 1 more year to make the timeline to make another segment.
Yeah, Julie Delpy in an interview said they don't have a plan right now to make another one.
Think they did, yeah.
Yeah, but who knows? Who knows?
Really weird moment happened. It was a couple of weeks ago now. I watched Avengers Age of Ultron because I've been talking about it for a show called WandaVision, and I remember really not liking that movie, but I'm like, I should give it a chance because everyone was telling me how great it was. Julie Delpy's in that movie.
Is she? I don't recall.
She shows up for like 3 minutes in Scarlett Johansson's Scarlet Widow flashback. She's like the head of the training institution that turned her into a killer. She's talking about like sterilization, all that stuff. I'm like, oh my god,
that's
just really good too.
That's a good segue to do 4 minutes on the Snyder Cut.
Well, I guess is there anything, because we've talked about Waking Life for like 8 minutes.
That's
Yeah.
right.
How, I guess, what is there to unpack? I mean, there a few years after this, they came out with a Scanner Darkly,
Right.
the adaptation of the Philip K. Dick story with sort of the same style.
Yeah.
I don't know. Do you think there's a reason we haven't seen this this style of animation? Because when I remember Waking Life and Scanner Darkly were popular in the popular culture. I don't know how they did well as box
I
office,
don't
but
think they did very well. That's my recollection. I don't know for that for sure, but I don't recall them doing very well. I think that like a lot of things that certain segment of the I hate to use the term youth culture, but I think at the time it's like there's a counterculture kind of pop culture thing that embraces certain things, but it doesn't spread to the wider audience. And so I don't think that they made much money. And I really wanted to like Scanner Darkly, and I just couldn't connect with it at the time, and I haven't revisited it since. But I love the animation style in the movies. I think it's interesting. In fact, it kind of turned me on to try and do rotoscope. And we did a little bit of it for some fantasy sequences and endings, film that I made before where we started on a much lower budget, so they don't look nearly as good. But I was like, oh, you can do this? Like you can just do this? So yeah, I don't know. I don't know why, but it's kind of like Charlie Kaufman doing stop motion animation for a serious film, like he did with Anomalisa. It's like it almost comes off like a one-off, especially because it's an art film and not that many people see it. So
I imagine it's really complicated too, as far as like pulling it off.
Yeah, for 2001, for Waking Life, I do recall that they shot it using mini DV cameras because they didn't have HD back then. So this look is certainly better, and it'll last longer as a credible look than mini DV standard definition HD. Not HD, standard definition mini DV images from 2000, 2001. So that was interesting. They kind of created some using some low tech. They created something that was much more interesting looking.
Yeah. I wondered while I was watching this today, like if he were to, because we know he's a big fan of revisiting characters and things, with the Before trilogy, with Boyhood, making that movie over more than a decade. I wonder if he would ever come back and revisit the themes, at least in Waking Life, because like I said, the ideas he's talking about, everything from youth culture to the anarchists to politics to, again, the nature of mankind's relationship with technology and things sort of telescoping narrower and narrower as time goes on. I feel like that's stuff that he was talking about 20 years ago. I think it went right over my head and probably a lot of other people's heads, thinking, well, this is never really going to come to fruition. And here we are 20 years later. Elon Musk is talking about putting chips in our heads so we can, he's testing monkeys right now who can play games with their minds. It's just it's bonkers. And I wonder if he were to come back and revisit this, is he going to be telling the future of 2041?
Well, Sujewa mentioned Slacker, and I really think if you look at Slacker and then you look at Waking Life, you see an evolution of the same kind of film, the same kinds of ideas. Slacker is it's really the same film, just without the story,
the dreamy
of
animation.
Well, without a connection of a dreamer,
the central figure,
right. It doesn't have that connection, but it is essentially just these random people in Austin telling these weird stories or their weird philosophies. And so I wonder if you were to go back, if you were to go watch Slacker, having just watched Waking Life, if you would see an evolution that you can almost imagine, given what he's done, him revisiting with another film that he might be planning at some point. Because he does, I agree with you, he does seem to do that. So
yeah, Ian, if you haven't seen Slacker, then you are in for a treat. There's a little bit more Waking Life.
Well, that's the thing, is Slacker is one of those movies that it comes up in conversation every few years, and I always put it on my list of like, I should watch that right now. And sure enough, a few years later, it's like, yeah, I should watch Slacker right now. Never happens.
Let's tack it on to one of our shows. That's remaining.
That's a great idea. You should.
Yeah,
I'm
yeah.
down for that. So speaking of tacked
So
on, let's talk about Zack Snyder's Justice League.
one final thing about
Oh,
Linklater.
okay. Yeah.
If he were to do some sci-fi movies, more sci-fi movies, that would be interesting.
Oh yeah. I mean, he's definitely got an imagination. I loved that's the power of him as a storyteller, is even in a movie that's kind of sold on the animation, the surreal animation, there's that scene where he pops up, he's got two cameos playing essentially the same character. But when he's telling that story at the pinball machine,
Mhm.
uh I was watching the movie in my head. Now I know he had a couple of like silhouettes of, some of the
Yeah.
faces of the people he was talking about, but he is such a just the writing was so rich. And then Wiley Wiggins' reaction to that, you could really smell the fear of, am I ever going to come out of this? You almost don't need something visual when you've got that kind of storytelling power behind you.
Yeah,
True.
I was gonna point to that scene as well, because it's for a director, he's a great actor too, and it's so well performed, and it's as a result, it is among my top 2 or 3 favorite segments of the movie. And it's a great ending. It's a great way to end it. So
Wake up.
yeah, it was perfect.
Yeah. Okay, so we'll talk about, well, first of all, Chris, have you seen the Zack Snyder cut of Justice League?
I did. I watched it in 3 parts.
Makes sense.
Yeah, but yeah, okay. So my feeling about the original cut was, I found there to be some enjoyable things in it, but it was such a mess that I ultimately I find myself when it's on, like it seems to be on basic cable a lot, like TNT or whatever, and it's one of those things I'll sometimes throw on in the background while I'm doing something else. And
Deliberately?
well, because there's just a couple of scenes that just work for me, but like literally it's a few things, and then other stuff, like every time Flash is on screen, he's great. I think that they really captured a great version of Flash in the movie, but it's so incoherent as a movie that I'm just shocked that it got released. And when I saw, and so as a result, not as a result of that, but it just in general, I'm not a big Zack Snyder fan. Nothing against the guy personally, but I just feel like when you watch Zack Snyder movies, I was telling Sujewa this, I think I was anyway, he's a great visual stylist, but he's almost like he's showing you still images from a comic book and not creating a moving image where that still image matters, if that makes sense. So he
Yeah.
wants you to focus on the still and look at
Like
what
in
I've
Watchmen.
created. Yeah, look at what I've created, and sometimes look at what I've created because it's straight out of the comic book that you love. But then it doesn't matter beyond that, and so I just haven't really connected with his work. So I thought the first Justice League first version was a complete mess. So then I watched this because I'd heard, I'd read Matt Zoller Seitz's review.
He loves it.
Well, I think he really liked it, but it was a measured praise because he saw a lot of flaws in it, but he saw a lot of vision in it too. And because of what he wrote, I was like, well, let me go into this with a positive attitude. And I frankly ended up liking it a lot more than I thought I would, and probably infinitely more than the other version. In the end, I think I told my brother, I think this is a great mini series. I think just making it a movie at 4 hours is just too much, because but if you look at like the opening segments that build these characters, and this is what I realized as I was explaining why I thought this, I really like that they took the time to build these characters, but as part of one movie, it feels very indulgent. Then I was like, but if they had just done separate movies, oh wait, like Marvel did, where and I know I'm a Marvel fan, but one of the reasons that I think that their cinematic universe has worked is that they had characters who had individual stories that worked, for the most part, they worked. I know there were some critics of some of the early movies, and these characters had issues and arcs and things that mattered, so that when they came together, there was you had a rooting interest in each one of them. And I think that Justice League didn't do that until the Snyder version, and then it had to do it all in one movie, which is why the movie's 4 hours long. So it feels like you're waiting to get to the plot of the movie, and it's spending a long time showing you Flash dealing with trying to save a girl, while he's applying for a job, which is a great sequence, but so it begs you to kind of figure out, well, does it belong in this movie? But again, if it were a mini series or a series of movies about these characters, then I think it works. And so I took it like that as I watched it, and as a result, I enjoyed it.
Ian, how did you like arguing with that team last night about whether the film was worth it or not?
It was a lot of fun. I was on the no side. Specifically,
Nerd Wars.
Yeah, I was asked to be on this Nerd Wars show for Popcorn Planet, which I'll link to in the description of this, because the review I posted to Rotten Tomatoes caught the attention of the guy who runs the channel. So I'd never been on this show before, so he paired me up with a guy named Vito, and we went up against two guys, Kobe and Dylan, who were gaga for the thing. Now, I want the record to state that we won the debate according to the judge, but then he threw it to the poll on YouTube, and we lost by 2 votes. So the people have spoken. But no, I watched this movie with my wife, and this is the third podcast I've talked about this on, so I won't go into it really. But we watched it a week ago tonight. We started at 8:00 at night. We watched it in one sitting. We ended up like MST3K'ing this thing because
nice.
I'm one of the few people who will say that the Joss Whedon version is the superior version because it makes so little sense. There's all this ridiculous, funny stuff to look at, from the CGI face replacement on Henry Cavill to the fact that everything happens so conveniently because it's 4 hours condensed down to 2, that it's at least entertaining in its awfulness. This I just thought was such a self-serious, dour, gray affair that I couldn't help but thinking of the Marvel movies and how they've done it so well. Everyone's raving about Cyborg. I thought it was a CW TV episode at best inserted into this movie. And I was thinking about, Captain America Civil War, which is the movie I think this should have been. People give the Marvel films a hard time because they're just all quips and jokes. I'm like, no, they're not.
They're really not.
Earlier on, you could maybe make that argument with like Iron Man 1 and 2, even though it's had gravitas. And as they go on, they get more serious. Captain America Civil War was dealing with some really adult issues and adult conflicts. The main drama was not them fighting a bunch of CGI robots at the end. It was 2 heroes fighting each other over ideology and feelings. But that movie also introduced their new version of Peter Parker Spider-Man in less than half the runtime as Cyborg got in his origin story, with a much fuller, richer character who was actually able to do something interesting.
That's a fair point. Yeah.
So that's the thing. It's like, you're not supposed to bring up Marvel when you're talking about this movie because people are in these different camps. But I'm like, if the shoe fits, I mean, you can have a solid critique of this film that involves the better version that's been done elsewhere. And I think that's what a lot of the hurt is. DC Warner Brothers was so behind the ball with creating their cinematic universe. They rushed into things and it shows. I think they've course corrected in some of the later films. Like, I think Aquaman is a lot of fun. I really thought Shazam was cool.
It's a good movie.
Shazam was great.
Yeah, I was more a fan of Wonder Woman 1984, kind of for the same reasons as the Joss Whedon version, because it's so ridiculous that I just thought it was kind of camp and fun. But it's like with this particular film, this 4-hour Snyder cut, yes, you're giving the fans what they want to see, but it's sort of a curiosity. I feel like the franchise has moved on from it. So I'm like, I'm watching stuff that is never going to be sequelized, really. So can I just
not
go to
relevant
bed
anymore? Yeah. I definitely feel like your defense, if you want to call it that, of the Marvel universe is pretty right on as far as I'm concerned. I always feel like I have to defend it because people are like, these comic book movies. I'm like, these are pretty serious movies with really emotional arc, emotionally engaged arcs for these characters. Like I can count on one hand the number of films that made me feel the way Endgame felt by the end, when they had gotten to that point when everybody comes back, and which is it's a rousing piece of cinema. I'm not saying it's the way I feel about The Godfather, for example, but it's to deny that it has an effect on you for a reason is to just say, well, I'm too serious for movies like that. I think the Civil War is definitely one of my top 3 or 4 in the Marvel universe because of the reasons you talk about. Because it is not a movie about a big beam in the sky, as people like to talk about with these films. It is two heroes who've been set up by somebody with a legitimate grievance. And now they're on the opposite sides of this argument, which is a good argument to have. Like my brother and I are on opposite sides of that when it comes to Cap and Iron Man. I was team Cap and he was team Iron Man, and growing up we were the exact opposite in terms of who we followed. So but I was like, I followed Cap's right. He saw the government corrupted and he doesn't trust governments, and I kind of agree with him. And those
which
are
is weird because it's Captain America, which you think would be the symbol of the U.S. government.
But Winter Soldier sets that up so well that he has to witness the government corrupted, the government that he gave his allegiance to completely corrupted. That, and again, Sujewa, I know you want to get a word in here.
Oh, it's okay. Go ahead.
That one of the reasons I love the Marvel Universe is because they take Captain America on this arc of being the patriot who wants to fight for his country and becomes that and does fight for his country, and then sees his country betray those values in Winter Soldier, and then he becomes no longer Captain America, essentially. I mean, I know we still call him that, but for a while he's not wearing the uniform, or the same. They darken it considerably on purpose, and he's just Steve. People stopped calling him Cap for a while until really Endgame, because he returns to that glory when he shaves the beard and becomes Captain America again. And kind of visually get it. So I mean, that's a pretty full arc for a guy who's pretty simplistic in the comics. So
yeah.
All right. So my thoughts on the movie. I was a comic books fan as a kid. Well, maybe into teenage years. Then I got out of it, got into grown up stuff. So I think comic book movies are not really, I agree with Scorsese, it's not really, mature cinema, but they're great entertainment. It's a great Hollywood product. Go, after a long week, go watch, superheroes fight on a big movie screen. That's great. So this movie I watched because of the Matt Seist review. Otherwise, I wouldn't have watched it. The first version, I thought it was okay. Just a silly comic book movie. I didn't think it was great. It wasn't like Iron Man. I thought Iron Man was, much more entertaining and done better. So on this version, the final big battle, hour and a half or so, from the point they attack the dome until Steppenwolf is defeated. I thought that was great. Visually very interesting. I was really into it. The other stuff that was basically a repeat from the earlier movie was boring. I fast forwarded through a lot of that. So at 4 hours, it's too long. It's not edited. It's not edited like a regular movie. A good example for a good counterpoint is Saving Private Ryan. That's a war action movie with some character moments. So they edited that really well. So a real editor needs to take control of the 4-hour cut if they want to release it as a movie. If you want to watch it 1 episode per day for 6 days as TV, that could also work.
Yeah, people have there originally. I think there was a plan to release this as a 4-part or 6-part miniseries on HBO Max, and they scrapped that.
That's
And
a
so
good
now we're gonna
plan.
release it as I don't know if it is. I don't know how ratings or viewership or how they rate the success of this kind of thing, but I feel like the movie was not different enough from Snyder's version. Yeah, there's extra stuff in here, and there's certainly a hell of a lot more slow-mo. But I feel like if you release this in parts, it's like by week 3, they're gonna be like, I know where this is going. Am I really gonna like come back for 3 more weeks of this stuff? But no, I also want to rewind the tape here. I think Scorsese is full of shit on this point. I don't believe he's ever watched a comic book movie. I feel like he thinks they're dismissive and still like the Schumacher or maybe the later Superman movies from the 80s. There's a real dismissiveness there, and I think there's a real art and something that you pointed to, Chris, a maturity. These are legitimate cinema. Now they may be made for a wider audience, but I think they're also made for people who grew up reading comic books as a serious art form and want to see that seriousness represented on film. Yeah, there's humor to it. There's a guy who transforms from an ant-man into a giant man, and they're fighting on an airport runway. But the reason they're fighting each other, as we see in the rest of Captain America: Civil War, is very heavy stuff.
Yeah, I geek out over that stuff when he turns into Giant Man on the runway. I'm
fun
just
stuff.
like, I'm like, your comic book fantasies of seeing this stuff. My brother and I've talked about this because we grew up on Marvel Comics, and it's like we both said to each other, I never thought we would ever see this, and we're thrilled to see it. But yeah, I think that people have long looked at comic books as a children's medium, and I think that people would be surprised and probably would not let their kids read some comics if they actually read them, because they're pretty serious and they're dark at times, and they get into some serious geopolitical issues that I don't think, and relationship issues, and issues of sexuality and gender and stuff like that I just don't think people realize comics are dealing with. And so I'm a huge Scorsese fan. I mean, he's one of my huge inspirations as a filmmaker, and I was disappointed to see that, just because I feel like and I'm not making superhero films, so it's not about me personally, but I really feel like what you said, Ian, is true. There's just so much more depth to these films, but I do think that they have this reputation from the Schumacher Batman films, and yes, from Superman after 1 and 2, that they're just kind of not only really just for kids, but they're not good. They're not well made even. I mean, I just don't think those films were. I think Schumacher's Batman films are a travesty, and I think that they almost ruined the entire genre, and they did for a while. Actually, his last one did.
Yeah,
I think Scorsese. Go ahead.
I was going to say, I feel like comic book movies, even though they're very popular and it's a multi-billion-dollar industry now, even with COVID. I feel like we are in the phase right now where comic books were in the mid to late 80s, where we have people who are coming along and taking the medium seriously, and folks are going to start taking notice. I mean, you look at Mouse, Spiegelman's Mousterpiece, which ended up winning the Pulitzer Prize.
Right.
You look at, Frank Miller, Persepolis,
and
Oh, Ghost World. Yeah. You've got these art forms that are, not only adapted to the more legitimate medium of film, but are being recognized as literature and art. And I feel like I was not a fan of Joker, but people took that movie seriously. It got some serious Oscar attention. Maybe it's just with that character, because Heath Ledger did the same thing in 2008.
True.
But I feel like there's going to come a point where there's going to be a comic book movie that's going to be the Pulitzer Prize version. Maybe it's going to win Best Picture. I don't know. I can't imagine what that would look like, but
I felt like Black Panther came kind of close, and that was at least it got nominated, and but I think it came close in terms of discussions, just because it was dealing with real world heavy themes in its discussion of the hashtag Killmonger was right. The villain had a valid point. Still ultimately it's a superhero film, so not enough people are gonna
Yeah, and I don't know that I loved Black Panther. I just didn't think that was the movie to get nominated for the Oscar. I feel like that was more about like a social political kind of movement, but
make up for 100 years of excluding black filmmakers.
I guess, but I think that is, I would like to see maybe Black Panther 2, because ultimately at the end of that movie, it just did kind of devolve into a silly comic book film with a great kind of final finale to its antagonist and protagonist. So yeah, it kind of fell apart for me, but yeah, that I almost forgotten that was nominated for Best Picture. So yeah, there's but Joker, from last year or whenever it was, we're on this evolution where eventually something's going to stick, and it's going to be, I think, recognized as legitimate, and then it'll be interesting. I want the Oscar camera to cut to Scorsese's face when whoever opens that envelope and makes the announcement.
All right, on favor of Scorsese, Mouse and other realistic comics are not superhero comics, right?
It doesn't matter.
It does matter because
No.
mouse or the realistic things are basically taking neorealist cinema and putting it into the comic book form. So
Well,
that
but
kind of
Mouse is
thing will always
also
work.
but Mouse is also it's an allegory told through, cartoon animals.
Mhm.
Sure.
It's ultra realistic in terms of the themes and everything, but
Right.
it's
Animal
not.
Farm. It's
Yeah, it's
Yeah.
I also don't think that that would work necessarily if he was drawing those characters as people. There is something impactful about the disarming nature of it. It
Yeah.
starts off with like dad mouse and kid
Mhm.
mouse or like doing stuff around the house or pack up. I haven't read it in a long time, but they're like, oh, it's just kind of a cute little mouse story. And it's like, let me tell you about the war. And it's like, oh my God.
Get
Uh,
serious.
yeah. So
And
yeah,
the other thing about Scorsese is that for all his life, serious movies got funded, and that was the main thing. Big blockbuster, not blockbuster, but stuff like Goodfellas, serious high budget movies that made money, that had stars. All that was replaced starting the early 2000s with
Yeah.
superhero movies.
Well, and
So
he had
that's
to,
I think that's what he's complaining about. That
well,
those are not the real movies.
in fairness to him, Goodfellas and every other movie he's made has never been easy to make. I mean, he's struggled to make everything that he's made. So yeah, I mean, I think Scorsese justifiably has a chip on his shoulder about the Hollywood system and what it's interested in versus what he's interested in. And
Hollywood wants to make money. This is an easy way to make money.
yeah,
Easier.
and he loves classic cinema, which
Mhm.
Hollywood used to make money. But classic cinema has evolved into superhero cinema now. It goes through trends. That's where it is for the past decade. But and that's just not something he's interested in. So
yeah, and that's sort of my problem with the heart of his argument. In addition to the fact that I don't believe he's ever watched a Marvel movie, it
I'm
just
sure he
smacks.
has.
Well, I don't know which ones he's watched. Maybe Thor
Don't
2,
know.
and that was enough. Because they're not all winners out of the park. But I also don't know how he watched them, because you can watch a movie with your arms crossed and just going, or you can open yourself up to the experience and say, is there something, these movies make billions of dollars worldwide. They have audiences that transcend, age, race, culture. There is something that connects to people as these modern myths. And if he can't clue into it, that's one thing. But his comments just smacked me of jealousy. Like, why does
Yeah.
everyone want to go pay, all this money to go see these silly, bright, immature things that are based on, cheap paper, funny books, and they don't want to come see my heavy, gritty mob movie? I'm like, well, I can't explain it, but that doesn't mean that you have to go and rip the legitimacy of it and say it's not as good as what you make.
But
I
ultimately,
heard it.
Scorsese wins because he made a lot of great movies.
Well, that doesn't mean his argument wins, but he certainly has made.
Right.
I heard there's another person who said something similar. I can't remember who said it, so I won't try to name them. But the person was saying, everybody was telling me I have to go see Logan because Logan is this great movie, and whoever this person was, he obviously didn't think much of superhero movies, and they're like, you gotta see Logan. Logan's a great movie, and he said, I saw Logan. I'm like, that's a good superhero movie. Like that was the level this person was willing to give it. It's a good movie in that genre, but it's just still a superhero movie. And I'm like, if you can't watch Logan, which I'm not saying, look, Logan is I don't like the X-Men films, generally speaking. There's a few that I think have that are okay. But Logan is just as a standalone piece about this guy and all that he's lived through, and and where he is, and his yearning to find family, and it getting cut out from underneath him in this film, and everything. I mean, it's a powerful story in the end. And I mean, if you can't watch that and just think, well, and this person said something to this effect, because he has claws, because he has metal knives coming out of his fingers, it negates all that. I'm like, well, I don't see how it does. That's like saying, I mean, frankly, that's like saying Edward Scissorhands isn't real cinema because he has scissors for hands.
Yeah,
he doesn't use, and he has a superpower the way he cuts hedges in the movie, but it's a fable instead of a superhero movie, and so that's okay. I just don't see that. It's just a different genre.
Yeah, it's just his personal preference regarding Scorsese. Obviously, all of this is cinema. It's just like Raiders of the Lost Ark. This is the new Star Wars, Raiders of the Lost Ark type movie, Marvel movies.
It is.
That's
just
fine.
particularly well done.
Yeah, long, not long, Lone Ranger and, you know, the Superman of the 50s. This genre has always been here. It's just now they can do it really well,
Right.
where it's become the most, you know, popular type of film and entertainment on the planet. That's fine. You know, it's all cinema.
Oh, and just speaking of Mr. Scorsese, before anybody gets the wrong idea, I am a Scorsese fan. I'm just not necessarily a fan of the way he talks about certain movies. In fact, the episode of this show, not the Slowdown, but another series I do, should be out already by the time you're watching this. My friend Cole and I did an episode on Taxi Driver because he had never seen
Nice.
it and I hadn't seen it in years. So we talked about that in glowing, gushing.
Yeah, he's
hell of a
brilliant.
movie. Yeah,
He's brilliant. I mean, I thought the one Silence.
Yes. Oh, yeah. A Driver and
breathtaking. Yeah.
Neeson? Jesus. Yeah.
Yeah. Breathtaking movie. I mean, I Scorsese's like as a film perspective, from a filmmaking perspective, is hung the sun, moon, and stars for me. You know, I'm disappointed with him saying that's not cinema, but it's like saying that's not cinema the way he defines cinema. So that's fine.
Well, and my gripe with that, aside from, you know, what I might think of his motives, which I can't speak to really, is that he is also an influential person. So I feel like if by him saying that, it gives credence to like the person you were describing talking about Logan to say, well, Scorsese says it's not cinema. So, you know, if the guy who made, you know, Mean Streets says it's a roller coaster ride, I don't have to pay attention to it, then I don't have to pay attention to it. I'm gonna go watch quote unquote real movies.
Yeah.
Well, but fear not, superhero movies are fine until they stop making money.
Yes.
That's true, no doubt. So,
all right, well, I have no segue for that out of, but I'm gonna say this has been a really fun conversation, and I can't wait to have another one. So we're gonna have you back, Chris, to talk about your new movie when it comes out, and hell, maybe even possibly we'll just go through your whole back catalog because all the premises sound really fun. So, well, not fun, but really intriguing.
Yeah, endings is not fun, I'll say.
Yeah, I haven't seen that one.
It's it's a movie all about it. Well, I made my first one, which Sujewa has seen, was a mock documentary comedy.
Yeah, I saw that.
And after that, I really wanted to make something serious because comedies are hard to get people to take you seriously as a filmmaker. And so Endings was my attempt to do something really serious, but I think I overcorrected. So
it's all right.
All right. Well, thank you very much. So Chris, where can people like check you out? Do you have like a personal website or a personal production company, or give us your info?
So yeah, you can find me, easy to find, hansenfilms.com. That's Hansen. Hansen Films has links to see the trailers for the films, and usually links for places you can watch them. But most of the films are available on Amazon. Where We Started is on Prime, so if you have a Prime account, you can watch it for free. Others are available on other sites like Tubi TV. I think Endings and American Messiah, my first film, and maybe Blur Circle.
And Clean Freak. He's in a documentary where he plays himself. I
made a self-focused documentary about my being a clean freak. So yeah, most of if you look at Hansen Films, you can see the names, then you can kind of search social media. I mean, not social media, things like Amazon and Tubi TV. And so the distributor that we worked with on all these films is really, and Fandango now.
Nice.
So, that's the IMDb TV and Fandango. So they're all kind of on all these sites depending on what people subscribe to. So
cool. All right. Well, thank you. And Sujewa,
my stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah, my stuff. Slowromancemovie.com for information on the new movie. Werewolf Ninja Philosophers on Vimeo VOD. You can rent it there.
Yeah, it's back up for rental now. It's no longer free.
That's right. That time's over.
Yeah.
And and I'm on Twitter a lot. Sujewa Fantastic. When I should be editing, but I'm on Twitter, wasting my time. But we'll have a Werewolf 2 movie coming out next year, and hopefully a couple more movies. And Slow Romance, everyone will hear about to no end for the next 2 years.
So whenever I see you on Twitter, your Twitter account handle, I always pronounce it in my mind, Sujewa Fantastique.
Yeah, there we go. That's a good way to go. So yeah, and hopefully, Ian, you'll be able to see Slow Romance soon, within a couple of weeks, and the rest of the world hopefully at some festival this spring or summer.
Awesome. I can't wait to see it.
Awesome.
So yeah,
Good
this has
show.
been another great episode of the Slowdown. Again, thanks so much, Chris. Thank you, Sujewa. And thank you all there, everyone out there for watching. Please like and subscribe if you liked what we did. You want to see more of it. Check the links in the description for my lovely and talented guests' work and also my stuff. And yeah, till next time, whenever that is, whatever that is, thanks and take care.
And send Ian lots of money.
Yeah, that too. Or at least I'll settle for likes and subscriptions.
That's right.
How about that?
That's
Yeah.
right.
All right.
All right.
Bye.
See you guys.
See
Have a
ya.
good night.
Bye.